Hello and welcome to the Tonic Weight Loss Podcast. My name is Harry Hedges, personal trainer, and I'm adding podcaster at the end of it now because I feel like I'm doing almost more podcasting than PT in these days at the moment. Really delighted to bring you another episode, season 3, episode 6, which is just awesome. We're getting so many patients on here now, and today's no different. I'm blessed to be in the presence of tonic patient Lauren Brumby. How are we doing, Lauren? You okay?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. No, I am. I'm all the better for having you in my presence for this today's podcast because I just love these so much. I find them very, me personally, I find them very therapeutic. So I hope
Yeah,
it's the same for patients.
I hope so. Yeah,
Yeah, and yeah, just excited to hear your journey, and I think also like pre-op because before I spoke to you today, you had some interesting things you want to talk about on that, which I think we can really kind of go through, and then post-op again. You mentioned it maybe being a bit harder in the early stage, which I think
yeah.
that's a really important dynamic to go down. But who is Lauren pre-op, and what brings us to this sort of day today?
Okay, so Lauren pre-op was. So I've been overweight my entire life, like literally from a baby to 8 months ago. I was always quite like, well, I got to the point where I was morbidly obese, but I was always an overweight kid.
Sure.
And then as I got older, I have 5 children. So, and I had them quite quickly when I was quite young. I say 20s. And with that came weight gain, more weight gain, and with that came an absolute plethora of health issues. I had a stroke at 28. I had irregular heart arrhythmia. I had IIH, which is extra fluid around the brain, and I got sepsis, a lot. So I was a very unhealthy, unhappy person, especially for the age I was. I shouldn't have, been at any of that point. But I think for me, food was such an emotional crutch because I personally have. So people don't really talk about this, but I have BPD and I have bipolar, and people don't talk about that because they think it's a bit of a, one of those things that they feel a bit shameful about. But I'm, an avid person that speaks out about this, and I think mental health and overeating and emotional eating come hand in hand. I really do. I really do. And I think for me that was where where my overeating came when I was younger, to not just being biological, but then it was psychological because of mental stuff I was going through as a teen. And although I was only born in the 90s, there wasn't much information out there or help. So then you could turn to another thing. But yeah, and then it just got to a point where I was like, I've got 5 kids. I was 32 at the time. 5 kids, 32. And I couldn't even so much as get out of bed and go to the toilet without having my heart going boom, boom, being like, like that. And anxiety was through the roof because I thought I couldn't even walk down the road. I thought I'd have a heart attack. I was, to that point. And I just thought, I can't do this anymore. It's not fair on my kids. It's not fair on my family. And it's not fair on myself. I'd be lying if I said I did it for everyone else, because obviously I did do it for me. That's, you've got to do it for yourself. But yeah, so that was me pre-op. I was, yeah, I was like, I think my highest weight, I think, was 18.5 stone.
Okay.
And then I
There's
think,
there's many layers to that. There's many layers to that. I just want to kind of like, because I think there's so much to talk
yeah,
about there.
sorry, I don't have to
No,
talk.
no, 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 no. It's all right. It's all good. It's all good. Like, I just kind of want to make sure because I want to make sure we touch on a couple of things there. I think, firstly, the connection between mental health and physical health is 100% a thing. There's no doubt about that. And I think you mentioned sort of anxiety there as well,
Oh, yeah.
and the health problems that you had. I can't help but think that'd be compounded by 5 kids. And what I mean by that is you're more aware of your health when you have children, I think, because you want to be there for your kids, don't you?
Yeah.
I'm not I'm not as experienced as you as being a parent. I'm have the pleasure of having a 9-month-year-old, and
Oh,
straight away I've got this is going to sound like a strange thing to say, but I've got a sty on my eye. I was calling the doctor yesterday. What is this on my eye? It makes you more aware of your health, I think. Having
yeah,
kids. So
it does. Like,
that,
I'd be
that makes complete sense.
terrified that my kids would have to wake up and find me dead, because there was only me. I was single, raised my kids pretty much single-handedly, and my biggest fear was one day they'd come in to say good morning to me and I would be dead because I'd had a heart attack or something, because I just couldn't take that time and
Yeah.
be and look after myself. So yeah, I totally get that. That was one of my massive fears.
And I think that you mentioned there sort of doing it for yourself rather than for other people, and I completely agree with that. Okay, and I know that sounds like a strange thing to say, but I think something like this needs to be a selfish decision. It's like I'm doing
Yes.
it for me. The byproduct is other people are going to benefit from this. Of course, your children are going to benefit from their mother being a healthier person.
Yeah.
Um, And also, you mentioned some of the sort of medical conditions there. I think
Yeah.
it'd be extremely fair to suggest that a young mother with 5 children, there can be the byproduct that can be weight gain sometimes, sleepless
Oh yeah.
nights, stress. I mean, does that, just as a mother by yourself, like that must be a factor as well.
I think so. I think obviously, I think the way I was, like I said, I was always overweight, but with that overweightness, I was kind of like, how can I say it, like proportioned, if that
Sure.
makes sense. Like I was just a naturally bigger person, but it
Mm.
wasn't. It wasn't like to. Oh, sorry. It
No, you're
was.
right.
It wasn't to the point where people actually kind of looked at me and saw me as a really, really big person. It was just, that's Lauren, she's bubbly, she's always been shapely. But then as I had children, all of that kind of started to become like massive changes in my body, and it was like my back, like I had back fat that went down to the top of my bum cheeks,
Got
like
you. Okay.
it came up everywhere. And then like the belly, like the apron bit, before it was just like you have a chubby belly, and then it, kind of thing like that. So I think it went from being overweight but kind of getting away with it to then having a severely, morbidly obese kind
I
of
think
body.
you can think. I've spoken to people in the past. This is before I worked for Tonic and stuff, where it can almost be perceived as part of the charm that I hide it well.
Yes, that's that. Yeah, that was totally me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
100%.
I can understand why that would be perceived as a desirable thing to have. But also, what I would say is that, okay, aesthetically that maybe is a desirable thing, but physically, health wise, there are sort of certain statistics to suggest that maybe. And I think sometimes, and a theme of this, and probably this is my next question a little bit to you. Sometimes people have to almost, when I say hit rock bottom, a moment happens where they go, right, enough's enough. I can't do this
Yep.
anymore for myself, for my kids. I can't do this anymore. And if you have that kind of slightly comfortable, well, I don't show it very well.
Yeah.
You're not going to necessarily have that moment, are you? And I think
No,
that can
you're
be,
not.
yeah, and that I don't want people to hit rock bottom. I don't want people to have bad
No,
things
of
happen.
course
Of
not. Of
course
course
not.
not. But
But
sometimes that's what it takes.
correct, and I think that's something that it's a bit like, it's a hard one to describe. But it's a bit like work sometimes. If you're very comfortable at work, that can be slightly problematic than you hating your job. Because if you hate your job, you probably quit it and try and do something else.
100%. Yeah.
And does that kind of make sense? And I think so. Did you? And as much as you're willing to sort of share, like, did you have that sort of moment? You mentioned sort of like not want your kids to find you, but like,
Yeah. I
did you
mean,
have a moment where you went, not enough?
I think even after the stroke, because I had a rare form stroke, I still didn't have that moment. After,
Okay.
like, even after that, it wasn't until I think, obviously, I don't even know what it was when I got to that point, but I'd put so much weight on really, really quickly to the point where I looked at myself. And I used to think, oh yeah, no, I like my shape. I used to, I'd wear crop tops, I wouldn't care. And it got to a point where I was like, it's horrible to say it, but I was disgusted looking at myself, and I thought this is not normal to be that size. This isn't healthy. This is, and it was a point where I thought, actually, and I was really poorly, really, really poorly all the time. And then I think I thought to myself, well, you're depressed, you're anxious because you're always poorly, or something's going off, and you're lucky to
Right,
be
wasn't
alive.
it?
Yeah, and then it all just came up where I was like, well, Lauren, you're morbidly obese, and I literally had to say it to myself because I think I kidded myself for so many years that I wasn't,
Yeah.
and it's just I just was big boned, or you kind of just convince yourself otherwise, and because the people around you, although yes, they love you, of course, and if you're there in someone's life all the time, I suppose they don't notice, because a lot of people say to me now, we never really noticed how big you were until now, and it's like,
I think that's multi-layered, isn't it? Because it's like
it is.
one. Okay, yeah, people might not notice because they see you often, and it becomes the norm. But also, people aren't comfortable telling people maybe
No.
a fact like that either, and nor
No.
would you necessarily accept it. By the way,
No, God, no. I don't think I would have accepted.
I-
My mum would comment on my weight. She did
yeah,
since I
I
was
think
young, and I just think she was just being horrible, just being mean.
I,
you know?
I've experienced weight gain, and if someone tells it, and it's usually someone who's extremely close, like a mother or something like that, I don't take it very well, and I'm somebody who helps people with this stuff, right?
Yeah.
You should, and I take it as in like, all right, give me a break, will you?
Yeah.
I get it. It doesn't necessarily springboard somebody into action.
No.
But yeah, and I think again, sort of leading into sort of the children's side of it as well. It sounds to me like just a compound effect of everything multiplied by 5 children, which is unbelievable, admirable. I mean, I've got, like I said, I've got a 9-month-old, and me and my wife say to me quite often, "Could you imagine having another one?"
I
And
know, yeah.
fair, I salute you, Laura,
Thanks.
for being such an incredible achievement to be able to do that while also recovering from this as well. And I know you want to talk about sort of diet culture and the sort of the anti-diet side of things.
Yeah.
Let's have a good conversation about that before we go through your kind of recovery and whatnot. Was that something you fell into sort of pre-op quite heavily, would you say? And looking back, is that where this kind of reflections
I'd
come
say
from?
post-op was when I became real diet, like really anti-diet
Oh,
culture.
okay, that's okay.
100%, because I was constantly in and out of Slimming World and Weight Watchers and, you know, intermittent fasting, all of that. And it got to the point where, like, after my sleeve, when I could start eating properly and I could start eating a bit more, if I wanted to treat myself to something, that diet culture part of my brain was like, you can't eat that.
I
How
love it,
dare
yeah.
you?
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
would beat the hell out of myself. And it was, and then you'd get on the scales like twice to 3 times a day, because you'd be like, well, I treated myself to a nice coffee. See, that would be 50 points at Slimming World. And I would get obsessed then to the point where I remember emailing you once saying, I'm barely getting 600 calories a
No,
day
I
in.
was going to bring that conversation up. Yeah,
Yeah, and it was due to the fact that anything I really actually wanted to, because it's hard to find what you want to eat after the sleep because you have no appetite. And the things I did want to eat, I was too guilty, like in the diet mindset that no, because, you know, that's not a diet food, that's not a free food, that I wouldn't eat. So then I was eating less 600 calories and I was ill, like, do you know what I mean? It wasn't worth it. And then I got to a point where I kind of just thought, right, this has got to stop. I could see other people beating themselves up. And I was like, no, we're not doing it. So I went and I remember and what did I get? I went and got myself a little chocolate bar. And I used to, if I ate chocolate, I'd eat a big wedge of it. And I thought, right, and it was kind of like a fear. It was like fear factor, opening it and thinking, oh God, what's going to happen? You know, because you always remember that thing, moment on the lips, lifetime on the hips. And
yeah.
you're like,
It's a terrible saying.
100%. And you just think, if you have that one bite of chocolate, that everything you've lost all of a sudden is going to go back on in that one piece.
That's the problem with it, okay? And I think there's a few things going on there, right? It's firstly, when I say a lack of understanding, I don't mean that because when you're surrounded by diet culture, that becomes the norm, right?
Yeah.
That becomes the understanding. And words like sin and bad foods and things like this. I think what my way of sort of countering that towards helping people is first we've got to realise that your body is far more resilient than you're giving it credit for.
Yeah.
Okay, it doesn't just hold on to fat if you have a chocolate bar.
No.
The scientific law of thermogenesis, which basically our body's constantly heating itself to function. It needs a certain amount of calories per day to function. While me and you are talking to each other, we're both quite fidgety hands people,
Yeah.
as we said before the podcast. But
Yeah.
that's burning calories. But even beyond that, our hearts are beating, our lungs are breathing, our digestive system might be working, our neuromuscular connection, our eyesight, all these things require calories. If we don't have calories, and this is probably where you were feeling when you're having those very, very low calorie days,
Yeah.
we start to shut down, okay?
Yeah.
And the body will shut down the what it perceives to be the least important. So things that actually don't matter to survive.
Yeah.
So a classic one for girls is the menstrual cycle, for example, will start to shut down essentially, which is a terrible thing. And that's why you need a certain amount of calories. Now, that doesn't mean just overload on chocolate because Harry says it's fine because you need
No,
calories.
yeah.
What I'm saying is that it just goes part of that conveyor belt. Now, of course, the problem with that food group is it's not very nutrient dense.
No.
Okay, so people sort of say, "Oh, it's a calorie deficit." Does that mean I can just have 4 donuts a day? Well, technically, yes, but you wouldn't be able to stick to 4 donuts a day because you'd feel horrendous.
Yeah.
You wouldn't get enough iron and all the other vitamins and minerals that you need. So it's a silly thing to suggest. But so the idea is like 70-80% nutrient dense stuff because to allow your body to thrive, and 20-30% absolutely fine to have the slightly more calorie dense stuff if you need it to snack on. If anything, I think it improves compliance long term
100%.
because the analogy I always use is like if you're looking to save money, a holiday probably doesn't make sense because it costs a lot of money. But are you more likely to maybe work quite hard to get to your holiday and maybe have a reset and work harder afterwards to earn more money? Probably. So then the holiday's a good idea, isn't it? You know, it adds compliance.
I now don't deny myself. I don't buy diet anything, low fat anything. I do not deny myself anything.
Yeah.
And that was an incredible and freeing habit to break. It was just like, wow. And then when I got to that point and I was still losing, because I was active, like you said, because I was more active, because I was more mobile and everything like that, I realised that I don't have to deny myself these things or punish myself because I've enjoyed what I eat. I just don't overindulge anymore.
Yeah, and I think it's a progressive approach rather than a regressive approach, a proactive approach rather than a
Yeah.
reactive approach. And progressive and proactive is I'm going to hit a certain amount of protein per day. I'm going to drink a certain amount of water per day. I'm going to move daily. Dare I say I'm going to concentrate on my sleep. I appreciate with 5 kids that's not always a given. Like, sleep. So more.
Yeah.
We respond very well building habits where we do more of something than we do. I can't do that ever again.
Yeah.
And I think people set themselves up for the fall. And I always ask anyone who starts a diet routine or any structure or any routine really, if you can't see yourself doing it in a year's time, unless you've got some mad time constraint, like you're getting married in 2 months, or but if you don't see yourself doing it in a year's time, I wouldn't bother starting it. I would slow it down so you're still doing it in a year's time. You're much better doing 3 exercise sessions a week for a year than you are doing 7 exercise sessions for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And that's the be all and end of it all. But yeah, I think that the diet culture has a lot to answer for.
Oh yeah, and they make it. It's just the way they monetize on people that.
Here's the thing, right? This might be me being a glass half full kind of guy, Lauren, right? I think they all try to help. Okay, I think they all tried. I don't think there's these evil people going. If we do this, they'll have to keep coming back. Maybe they didn't respond once they realised people kept coming back. I don't know. But I think the heart was in the right place to create a quantitative effect on something because people find weight loss difficult. It was harder to track calories or whatever what you want to call it.
Yeah. I see them like cults. I think.
Yeah, I can see you're coming from your angle.
I don't know if you'll have to take that one out.
No. But where I do agree is I think maybe they can fall into that. Because, but I think they started off with the best intentions.
Yeah.
But truth be told is, and I think they're doomed from the beginning because there isn't a one-size-fits-all answer to this stuff. Okay. Yes, it's a calorie deficit for fat loss, but that can be made up in so many different methods, so many different ways of doing it.
Yeah.
And the idea of me saying to someone, "Oh, I did it this way, so it'll work for you," is misled from the start anyway.
100%.
And I think that's probably what sums it up quite nicely. You have to have some sort of restriction in a diet.
Oh yeah.
Otherwise, you just do whatever you like.
Exactly. Yeah.
How you empower people around that restriction based on their habits is the key, rather than saying my way's the way.
That's
the best way of analysing it. I can't say that, but I'll definitely edit that bit out.
Yeah.
But no, okay. So you thought about going down this road. Where did the conversation with Tonic, or indeed you look at other companies? Did you look at maybe, I don't know, injections or abroad or anything like that?
So I looked at injections, and then I wouldn't have been approved because I had pancreatitis years ago. So I was like, well, that's not an option. And then who was it? So I watch a lot of TLC, and have you ever seen like 1,000-Pound Sisters so there's these programs about Americans that are like very, 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 very obese, and they have weight loss surgery. And that was like, and I'd been watching these for a few years, and I always thought, I wish I was brave enough for that. Or, maybe that would be an option for me. But then you'd get the conversations from, like, say, my mum, who ended up being my biggest supporter, by the way, but being like, oh, if you can't do it by yourself, then, that's cheating. And so you don't do it, and you put it on the back burner. And then I remember saying, because I had a choice, it was lose weight or have to have brain surgery to have a stent put in my brain. And this is where I went... this is where I went, right, I'm booking surgery. And I contacted Tonic. They were just so great. Then the woman was so communicative, and they made me feel so like they were just really understanding. Like, it weren't, you expect when you call someone else, they go, oh, what do you want to do that for? You expect but obviously they weren't like that. And I had a word with my mum, and without my mum, I wouldn't have had my surgery, because my mum got because I did the finance option, but my mum did it in her name so without my mum, this all wouldn't be possible. Considering she was the biggest skeptic, she was my strongest supporter. She's basically saved my life as far as I'm concerned, and she gave me life, and now she's saved me life and been able to, and then she's given me more life by letting me have, allowing me to have this operation. So, and then just from start to finish, Tonic were just great, and then the support afterwards. I think a lot of people you hear, they have surgery and they don't have that support afterwards. And I feel oh God, yeah, I feel without that, I would have really struggled, like really struggled.
But okay, again, when you're talking so many good points, there's so much to touch on
Sorry,
there as well.
I do get
So
those.
just going back to the injection side of things, I think what I would say is well done for having the knowledge and understanding of pancreatitis, that what you can and can't do with that stuff, because there is a black market to this side of things, and
Yes,
desperation and emotion can create poor decisions around not knowing the
100%.
full facts around your health. So I think that's a
Yeah,
really, you sort of like said that and moved on. I was like, that's a really important thing to talk about there, because
yeah.
people get hold of this stuff and they don't care about the other health base. They just want the weight loss and that's it,
It
right? So
panics me because
people need to.
recently there was actually a news article recently, and a woman did die
I
from
saw it.
pancreatitis
I
from
saw
weight
it.
loss
Yeah, the
injections.
nurse.
Oh,
The
sorry.
nurse. Yeah.
But that,
No,
and then
right.
I was like, imagine if I actually had gone against it and gone a different way and gone, oh, it might be fine whether I've had pancreatitis or not, and I was one of those
Yeah, it doesn't bear
statistics.
thinking.
It's terrifying.
Five
Like
children, five children as well, man. Like
that
doesn't bear
is,
thinking about. So
yeah.
I just want to make a real big point on that, because it's not people when emotions involved and stuff, and they think, okay, I'm getting healthy by doing this. I'll take a risk. Don't, okay,
People are
because
desperate.
it's
They're
yeah.
desperate at the end of the day, and
Desperate.
people can kind of, I say people because it's not necessarily people, but well, people will utilize people's desperation. That's the scary thing.
And the other thing as well is that, of course, this process is with a surgeon, highly qualified, structured. You know exactly where you stand. All tests are done.
Yeah,
There's benefits to that, right? I
yeah,
think the other thing I just want to talk about was your mother there, because I think it's fascinating that despite not agreeing with it, backing her daughter to go and do it. And I think that's a
yeah,
really commendable trait in any human being. You're allowed to have an opinion, but are we going to deliver for people when it feels like they know? Okay, and I
yeah,
think that's a really powerful thing, because how many times do people think I'm right, so I'm not getting involved in this? To
yeah,
actually go against what she thinks and maybe grow into the idea of actually liking it, eventually seeing her
yeah.
daughter thrive,
She
that's
went through.
absolutely massive.
She proper went against her own, her own thoughts, her own morals around it, and everything like that. She's, my mum's old school, but she's also just incredibly strong. And although she saw the point I was at in life, and that I was determined, and that and you could tell when I was going down to theatre the fear on her face, but not once did she say, I'm not going to help you do this. Even she said, I don't agree with it, and I'm worried for you, that what if it doesn't work, stuff like that, but I'll help you. And I literally couldn't. And then she came home with me. She stayed with me for a week while I was, the first week after surgery. She was just incredible. And I found the whole after surgery, apart from the eating bit, pain, everything was great. And I don't think I would have found it as easy if it weren't for her. She was just amazing.
Well, that's a sign of true intelligence, I think, because intelligence isn't knowing all the answers.
No.
Okay, people think intelligence is. Intelligence is an open mind to listen, learn, and understand,
Yeah.
and that's what she showed in abundance there, because you
100%.
don't have to be right. And by the way, the irony is that when you went through that process, she didn't want to be right, did she?
No, she
She
didn't.
wanted you to be solely right, and,
Yeah.
and obviously, you were. And I think the last point I wanted to make from what you just sort of said there was the post care, and thank you. Obviously, it means the world of us that people think that about our aftercare. But I think about the conversation that we had. You mentioned it earlier on. I wanted to bring this up
Yeah.
around. You contacted me around I'm having 600 calories a day, and I think you knew that you needed to have more.
100%.
But
Yeah.
and this wasn't you, Lauren. But some people can go, "Oh, this is great. I'm only having 600 calories a day."
No, I was
Now,
hungry.
oh yeah,
I
sure,
was
right. But also,
starving.
you start to shut down eventually, right?
Yeah.
But but I get lots of questions like, I'm having this. Is this too much? And they will throw this very low number at me, and I'm kind of like, but if there wasn't that care system in place, people are just like hoping for the best, aren't they? Or maybe even worse, believing that this creates a low calorie restriction, so therefore that's the answer. And
You
what I
get
love,
people, like we get people on our Facebook group and that, because we have a bariatric support page, but we get people, and you see it a lot on bariatric platforms like TikTok and everything like that, where people say they're 150 years out and they barely reach 900 calories a day, and they're proud of that. And then they make people that are hitting 1,200,
feel bad.
1,500 feel awful, like as if. So then people restrict themselves and stop eating
100%.
and become unhealthy, and it's really toxic. All this is like, although diet culture is toxic, the bariatric culture can also be just as toxic.
Oh, well, of course, it's like in any
100%.
community. It's like as a saying in social media, it's not social media that's the problem, it's the people using it that's the problem,
100%,
right?
yeah,
Like,
it's
it gives
really.
everyone, they are just people, it's a society thing. But,
Like, who wants to starve themselves? Because I know I still love food. I still
But
absolutely love food.
but that brings us back to that point we made earlier on around, you're right, it becomes a flex. Oh, look at me, I can only eat this amount. That's not a good
Yeah,
thing. That's not the answer. Again, your body needs a certain amount of calories to function. Now, the idea is post-procedure, yes, you do eat a low amount of calories. There's no
yeah,
doubt about it. The idea is that when someone is of the obese category, weight loss is probably the best thing they could do for their health. The
yeah,
studies over and over again show that that is the best thing they could do for health. So we take a bit of a hit on the metabolic rate and the metabolism and things like that to allow that to come down. So therefore, you can then build it back up again. That's kind
yeah,
of the goal here. It's not eat as little as possible for as long as possible and get the weight loss as quickly as possible. Because by the way, the body's clever, right? It will down-regulate metabolism to protect itself from doing that if you eat too little for too long. So that's a real
yeah,
horrible, bumpy place to be. Not eating very much and not losing weight is a terrible
yeah.
combination.
Oh no, yeah, that's awful.
De-energized and what have you. Yeah, really, yeah, don't want to go down that road. But again, just to my point there on the aftercare is we're all aligned with the fact of, okay, we're here now, this is where we're at. And of course, when I speak to you, and that case, I'm not going to be naive to the fact that that can be the thinking pattern. So the answer is you've got to eat more. What you're doing, you're going to harm yourself. That's very direct and aggressive. It's a case of like we might want to look into sort of eating more over time because this isn't where we want to be. You need to fuel an active lifestyle,
Yeah,
and you're not going to be active on what you're doing now. You're going to be really. Well, you might be able to do it for a day or two. You might have
yeah.
doses of intensity, but the consistency is not going to be there.
No,
And
'cause I think
there's
I remember you saying to me, because I said, "Oh, I'm still going. I'm going to uni and everything like that," and you were like, "How?" How?
yeah, yeah, and I like. Well, I think
You were like,
it was how. 100%, 100%. I was like, how are you doing this? And I was like,
yeah,
I don't see it. But what that says to me, you've got a very strong mindset, and you can push yourself. I don't know if it's going to last that way though.
yeah.
And
It
again,
didn't
we should be
last.
doing.
It didn't.
Yeah, we should be doing things that we can do. I see ourselves doing later on, like 3 months, 6 months, 9 months down the line. So, well,
Yeah.
here's a great question: how did you navigate yourself around that?
So I think it was just the fact that I gave my head a wobble and I saw people beating themselves up, and I thought, oh, I don't want to live like this. It's just like being on a diet. And I thought, I haven't gone through this life altering operation to
Yeah,
sit there and be on a diet. And I was like, so I found ways to get calories in that weren't food. So I would have, so this is why I never drank coffee before surgery. Probably terrible for me, but I drank a lot of iced coffee, but instead of making it with water, I made it with full fat milk. So I'd get my
okay.
calories up
Oh,
that
okay,
way.
getting calories in. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, so I would,
Protein.
yeah, basically, and I'd try and focus. Like I remember you saying to me, what you have, and focus on the protein. But meat was incredibly hard, and cheese was incredibly hard. So the proteins was the hardest thing to get in. So I thought, right, I'll have this, and I'll put protein in it. So then eventually things just kind of settled, and all of a sudden I was sitting there, and I thought, oh, I can eat. Like, oh, I could eat a little bit
Yeah,
more, and then it got a little bit better and a little bit better, and now I hit happily 1,200 calories a day, and I feel very satisfied in that, very very
good.
satisfied.
I think two things that we talk about the anti-diet culture there. Two things, and and this comes up quite a lot, right? And I get it. You said there, I've had this operation. I'm still thinking the same way. I think your brain
Yeah,
takes a little while to catch up with what's going on a little bit, right? Because the advice is always, and this is the difference. This is the big difference, particularly if you have, in my opinion, a very strong aftercare. The message is, no, we want to eat more. Well, that's not diet
yeah,
culture. That's the complete
no,
opposite of diet culture, isn't it?
it
You know,
is.
we want you to eat more. You just mentioned there was a sort of a moment where you go, oh, I can eat more, and you said it with
Yeah,
joy, with happiness.
yeah,
Well, that's
absolute
not that's
joy.
not diet culture. That's the opposite to diet culture, isn't it? Okay.
Yeah,
So suddenly it started to click, and it's like, oh, now, okay. So physically, obviously you're losing weight during those early stages, and that's
yeah,
fulfilling in many ways as well. But it's not fulfilling if we are running on empty the whole entire time.
no,
If anything, you could feel weight loss makes people feel a lot better for many reasons, right?
yeah,
But if you're not fueling yourself efficiently, you could feel just as bad, to be honest. So when people post procedure, we get it on our Facebook group all the time. Oh, I'm worried I'm eating more. I'm worried I've had.
yeah,
I understand that, right? You've had a tool to aid a restriction, but no one we're not seeking perfection here. We just want prioritization over the pillars that we ask people to do. And
yeah,
when you do that, it's extremely likely you'll thrive.
yeah.
And talk to me about that. You mentioned your mother being there on the day and stuff. How was the day?
So the actual op day. So it was.
Mm.
It was nice. So we obviously went and visited the hospital before because I went and got my pre-op med. So they gave me an anti-sickness. So I saw the nurse. She did my weight, my height. I did. So I got an anti-sickness and I got Clexane, because of my previous stroke, which was a blood clot in the brain. I had to have a little extra of the blood thinners beforehand and afterwards. So I picked all those up, took them the night before my surgery, and I was terrified. Bear in mind, I'm an anxious person. I thought I was going to die. I literally did. That was in my head.
Well, I think with that in mind, I'm keen to talk about that because I speak to patients all the time post-procedure who are, maybe, and I get it, anxious towards introducing exercise or anxious towards eating more food sometimes, as we just touched on a minute ago.
Yeah.
And I try to say to them, you do realise you've done the bravest, hardest part by having it all done in the first place, right? And I think...
Whether it's whoever it's with, whichever company or wherever you go in the world, this operation still comes with risks. Even if you have the best surgeon in the world, there are still risks. So really, and it is a really, really drastic way to lose weight. Whether we like that or not, it's a drastic way to lose weight. We're cutting out 80% of my stomach, or other people are having their whole, digestive system rewired in order, because this is the last resort. But that's, it is a last resort, and it is drastic, and obviously if there are other ways and you could do it, but for me it felt like this was the only way I could maintain the weight loss and also change my whole mindset. I know I'm doing this thing where I touch on 20 million things, but obviously that's
no, it's good. It's good. 100%. I think.
This. Sorry, go on.
No. So the internet connection cut out a teeny weeny bit there. I think we were like both singing on the same hymn sheet a little bit. But no. I think what I wanted to say was, it is drastic. It is drastic, yeah. But that doesn't in life mean it's wrong. Okay, no. and what I mean by that is, when I explain what I do for a living, okay, sometimes I get people sort of obviously ask me about it and what I do and stuff, and they say, why can't people lose weight without it? And I say, honestly, from having the pleasure of helping thousands of people over the last sort of 5 years or so, it gets to a point where it's like checkmate a little bit, okay? And we spoke about that vicious cycle earlier on, okay? So numerous factors, socially, family, medically, physically, mentally, all the reasons why weight gain can occur we touched on earlier on, right? Mm-hmm. The podcast I did previously with a lovely lady called Lucy, she said she called it the stealth half stone. It was just half stone every 6 months to a year or so. You didn't even notice it a little bit. You said yourself, like, it becomes part of the identity a little bit, right? Yeah. But then it gets to a threshold point of, now I'm actually struggling to move. Or maybe mentally, if I go outside, I've been taunted when I go outside in the past because of my weight. So suddenly outside's not much of an option anymore due to anxiety. There's pain, joint pain, makes it's very natural. If something hurts, not to do it. Okay, so exercise is now becoming a bit of a problem. So we're sitting inside more. Well, what do people have when they're sitting inside more that's going to make them feel better? Probably calorie-dense food, right? Yeah. Or maybe in some people's cases, alcohol as well. This compounds the situation, so you can totally see how it gets to that point. And then, okay, fine, we're making a decision to flip it. We want to lose weight, right? And I'm sure everyone pre-op has started diets at their heaviest. Oh, yeah. We've got the diet culture to contend with, this confusing nature of what's the right blooming way to do this stuff. We've got the comparison piece, because everyone's trying to lose weight, and you hear someone somewhere's lost more than you, and why have they done that? I'm working hard here. You have stress, so you're not in control of stress. 5 children, particularly, you're not in control of stress. Yeah. So it's hard, is the answer, right? It's difficult in so many ways. And what this does, this is not the answer. What I always say is, if it was easy post-procedure, this really segues us nicely into the next point a little bit.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you. To get my chart. Right.
If we segue, this will segue into our next point really nicely. If it was super easy, you sat there and you lost the weight, you didn't have to do anything.
Yeah.
I don't need to have a job, do I?
No, yeah.
You don't need a dietitian, you don't need a psychotherapist, you don't need anybody, because you just do it and you feel better and that's it, job done. So we know it must be harder than that. But the stigma, for some reason, doesn't sort of think about that sort of side of things. So I guess this brings me quite nicely to something I know that you were keen to talk about, and I'm certainly keen to talk about as well. It was more difficult in the early stage than you thought, but you actually thought that was one of the things that actually helped define the journey.
Oh, 100%. I don't know if I was definitely naive, and I I don't think I realised. I mean, the LRD was the first big shocker for me on this journey. The LRD, and that's before we even
Okay.
had the op. The liver reducing diet was probably out of this journey. I must say, was probably the hardest part
That makes sense on paper in a way because
because I
there's no
could eat.
intention.
If I wanted
Yeah.
to, I could have ate what I wanted. I could have cheated. I could have done it. But I actually had to, for the first time in 32 years, show restraint. And I'd never felt hunger because I was always eating. Obviously, I was overweight. I realised I'd never actually felt true hunger because
Yes.
I was starving. Like I cried at some points because I was so hungry. But that was because I was so used to using it as a crutch for everything and eating even when I wasn't, because I was bored or because I was sad or because I was happy, not because I was hungry, ever. So then obviously, then you have the op, and obviously I didn't go through a lot of pain. I was tired, but there was one point where I remember having a bit of Bovril because everyone said Bovril's great on the liquid stage, and I love Bovril. And I had this sip of Bovril, and I was like, "Look at me, smashing this operation like nothing, like everything's gone down so well." And then I was so violently ill because Bovril did not like me. That was the first time I went, "What have I done? What have I done? Why have I done this?"
Yeah.
Like it was awful. But yeah, it's just like, and then I never ever really looked at what I ate or how I ate. I convinced myself that I ate quite healthy because I ate salads, because I liked salads and because I liked vegetables. I convinced myself that before I lost the weight, I had no idea why I was overweight. It didn't make sense.
Okay. Okay.
Then having the op and obviously going through the stages and being conscious of what I was eating for the first time, all of a sudden I was looking into thinking, you have just kidded yourself for 33 years going, why am I overweight? I don't understand. I eat healthy. Not in any stretch of the imagination did I eat healthy. And, and it was like I literally had been kidding myself. And in those stages and in the bit where I could eat more and I was testing out what would be okay with my new tummy, what wouldn't, I was also learning things from, say, you about why protein's important and why carbs can kind of be, sometimes okay but sometimes not. And yes, you can indulge, but it just don't overindulge. Don't like it. It just all of a sudden these bricks were building. This house was building. I've never ever looked at food or my relationship with food, or even looked at food as a thing to eat healthy. It was just there. It was something that we always had. And
That
now,
sounds like a very big moment. That sounds like and that's not the operation that's giving you that moment.
no,
Okay,
it
like
was. I
that's
mean, the
it,
operation, like I say, it's a tool, and this tool that I've got, it made me really realise that it's not a fix. All of a sudden I had that epiphany. This isn't a fix. This isn't easy. This genuinely is a tool because it's given me like the thought to pause, the pause to thought or whatever it is, to then think of how to eat, how to look at, how to look at what I eat, protein, exercise. So it just everything like, and then I'm going to go off on a tangent again because I'm
no,
worried.
please go for it. No, that's right. That's no, please go for it. Go for it.
So I recently did, because I've got a TikTok, so I recently did a TikTok video. I've been in a stall for nearly almost 3 months, coming up to 3 months. I've been in a stall, and I think I found myself in that point because I was really honest with myself. I found that point saying, why am I in a stall? I wasn't gaining weight, but I wasn't losing it, and I was thinking, I've got a sleeve, I shouldn't, I'm just under a year, everything like this. And I was giving myself the same excuses I gave myself before I had the sleeve. And then I literally sat there and had a complete word with myself and said, the reason you're not losing weight, Lauren, is because I was cutting corners. I was cutting corners. I wasn't prioritising my protein. I was eating, although, say if you got like a little pizza like that, and if I would say it would take me 6 hours to eat it, but whether it took me 6 hours or 6 days, that is still 800 calories I was consuming in one day, as well as snacks, my protein coffees that I always have, my breakfast. So I was probably very, very slyly, without kind of consciously knowing, I was consuming way over, and I wasn't moving either. I was like, oh, I don't need to exercise this weekend. And I really, really had to have a word with myself. And that was 2 weeks ago. And since then, and I've gone back to tracking, I've gone back to, the basics that we spoke about right at the beginning. Because I don't believe in pouch resets. Like, nope, never going through that again.
No.
I went back to basics, and I've lost half a stone in the week because I've kicked myself up the berm. I've kicked myself up the berm. And I literally was, before the sleeve, if I got into those habits or started overeating, I never ever would have looked at it and gone, right, Lauren, what do we need to do? I would have just carried on, because I would have, but this literally just all of this whole operation is so much more than weight loss. It is just more, obviously that's our goal, to be healthy and lose weight.
Yeah.
But it's literally given me a whole complete new mindset. I never, ever, ever, ever would have thought of the things I do. I never would have held myself accountable like I do now. And I never would have been so sometimes brutally, horribly honest with myself as I do now when it comes to that. And
I think what that strikes me there, that sort of story there, if you like. And I think, by the way, that moment when you kind of go, oh, actually, I'm not sticking to these things. Let's bring it back in, and you get a result in doing it. I think that's an absolutely huge moment, usually around sort of 6 to 9 months post-procedure.
Yeah.
I speak to a lot of patients around that sort of stage. I go, oh, it's slowed down a little bit. And I go, okay, how compliant are we being? And often the answer is, well, not as good as I was at the beginning. And I was like, well, for us to assess whether there's some sort of issue here or whatever, we actually have to do the right thing for a period of time to sort of work it out. And usually when they do that, that situation, I tend to say to them, well, just track calories for a couple of weeks for me.
Yeah.
I'll look at it, and one of two things will happen. Number one is you start to lose weight again because there's an external source now checking and you want to do it right. Or the other thing that happens is, let's just say you don't lose weight in 2 weeks, but we've actually got data to look at here to go, oh, well, actually, you might want to tidy that up a little bit. That will make sense to me. Sometimes people, I'll say to them, are you hitting your protein? I'm doing 80 to 100. They track for 2 weeks. They're coming in at sort of 30. And I'm like, well, you think you're doing something, but you're actually not doing it. And that's become evident. But I think more importantly, what's happened, not just in the last couple of weeks, but for your... Because what I would say, at the very, very beginning of this conversation, when you mentioned what you were about pre-op, this seems to me like somebody who's very, very, very in tune now with what happened, why that happened, and how to counter it. And I think weight loss, when you're fueling yourself efficiently with the right amount of calories, offers a whole ton of mental clarity towards things. We
100%.
think differently. We're a bit more aware of ourselves, and maybe even a bit more honest with ourselves around... okay, that makes sense.
Your problem, Lauren. That was definitely
just like we touched on earlier on, just like we don't being told, oh, you put on a bit, and that's not a very nice thing to do, and you could argue it's got to be done in a certain way. We don't want to tell ourselves that that's the case either, and in a very, very busy life, and my word, you've got a busy life by the sounds of things, it's quite easy to go, that's the reason why, when actually probably you could do a bit more. And I say that very tentatively to somebody with 5 kids. I should have done more. I might have 5 kids like that, but I was giving myself a lot of excuses. And to sit there and say that if I sat there and said I am the most perfect bariatric patient you'll ever meet would be utter lies to anyone who watches this, and to you, and to don't lie about where you're at or where you're feeling or what you're eating. Don't think you need to sugarcoat things, or don't stop judging yourself and stop thinking that other people are going to judge you, because we are still human and we are still imperfect. Who wants to be perfect? Because I certainly don't. Like the goal's not to be perfect. That's diet culture, right?
Exactly.
The goal's not to be perfect. The goal's to prioritise the right things as much as you possibly can. Okay. Yeah. Christmas is coming up. Should people be perfect Christmas Day? Probably not. I mean, look.
I hope not. I hope people go to town on Christmas. I really do.
If you want to, do it, right? But
don't ever deny yourself these things. Like, I just see so many people upset, and it hurts my heart, because I'm like when you get the bariatric police on post, like, oh, you just had a McChicken nugget, how dare you? And I'll purposely do a video eating 4. And I'll be like, delicious, absolutely delicious. But then I will also go for a run for 20 minutes. And for me, my brain is, if I treat myself, I won't punish myself, because I would have found exercise as punishment. But now I'll do something I like. So if I treat myself, then if I want to fit those extra calories in from 4 chicken McNuggets, then I need to get my steps in, or I need to get something like that.
I think the key with that is you're exercising anyway. Okay, so it's not a punishment, is it? Do you know what I mean? Like, I think if someone was to, I've done that, so therefore I've got to do that. But if you're exercising anyway, You're being active, right? And being active allows you several more calories to fuel your exercise, right? And
and I love that. I love seeing the extra calories I can have in my app. I absolutely love that.
Yeah. And I think what will happen over time, Lauren, is that it'll become less and less about calories. Like, yes, they are the answer to weight loss, and they are the answer to maintaining. But really, it's your habits in place to the point where. Before we came on the pod, I mentioned about driving a car, and I don't want to use that analogy again. So it's like if you're learning a new language, you probably got to check the dictionary quite a lot. Yeah, you probably got to get on Duolingo now and again, just check a few things because you don't know the language. It gets to the point where your habits become so bulletproofed, and you understand balance, and you understand that to be perfect anymore, that actually you don't need to worry about calories anymore because you're just got the habits in place, and that's you. And if you wanted to tidy it up because you had a holiday coming up in 2 months, then maybe track calories for a bit. That's the way to do it.
100%.
And that's in my opinion happiness when it comes to nutrition and exercise. Got good habits in place. It's not about the calories. I'll tidy up a little bit if I need to. But more importantly, what can I go and do today? You know, there's a saying I really, really like. What is happiness? Well, look, that's a multi-layered question, but I think a big part of it could be waking up motivated and going to bed exhausted. I think that's a really good way of that. You've had a good day if you've done that. Okay? and they channel each other really nicely. And I always think there's a nice measure of just having a good night's sleep gets you going again as well.
Yeah, it does.
Where you are sort of post-procedure now, you sort of touched on the last couple of weeks or so, but if you give everyone a kind of an idea where you are post-op, how much you've lost, if you don't mind, and maybe some of the non-scale victories.
Yeah, so I was 18 stone 3, I think, when I started my LRD, so I always start from there. And I am now 11 stone 8. And so that's a nearly 7 stone loss. I'm 9 months post-op this month, at the end of this month. And I've got a whole life gained.
That's flown by.
I know, I can't believe it. I've got an entire, before I'd always say I wasn't thriving, I was surviving. And now I'm thriving. It's just, everything, it's just rolled into this thing. And I'm so incredibly proud of myself. I'm so incredibly proud of other people on this journey, and you know what? It does get me emotional because I can't believe that's almost 9 months, and I remember being for people that are starting day 1 or LRD or anything like that, and you're sitting there thinking, is that ever going to be me? Because I sat there thinking, that won't be me. I know it won't work. I promise you, with the work and the effort and everything like that, it will work, and you will get there, and life does get better. And always keep hope. Always keep hope.
I love that. Yeah, I always ask people what their number one tip is. I think you've just done it in a nutshell there. But I think what I like is if you link that towards what you said earlier on, that's the right combination. So absolutely, if day 1, if you're thinking, oh God, but that with the hard work and the learning being the charm. And there's always a theme on these podcasts, and it tends to be this: aren't the best things in life difficult?
Yeah.
You know, it's what we spoke about on the pod. But if it was easy, well, there's no value to that. Is
no,
there?
exactly. No one wants. I certainly. Well, I thought maybe I'd want an easy ride, but I feel. I feel like this year has been single-handedly the hardest year of my life, but also the absolute most, rewarding. And it has not been through battling and really, really, really going for it. But and the thing is, also, don't panic if you put a bit of weight on, because we're human again. Yeah, we're human again. I see it's all I keep thinking in my head is all the worries and everything I hear from other people, and it's just I want to be the person that sits here and says, God, I'm in no means perfect. I'm not going to sit here and preach and go, oh, look at me. I want you all to realise that we're all human. I mess up. You're going to mess up, but you can do this. We can do this, because if you've lived your whole life as an obese person or as an overweight person, psychologically that is already really going to play. You're going to
and another really important sort of thing to talk about there is that when somebody does the hard things, sees the benefits in doing it, thrives from it, loses an unbelievable amount of weight in the time frame, I think, especially when you're involved in the community, it becomes very natural to want to help others. And I think, true mastery isn't just putting it on yourself all the time. True mastery is actually going, well, actually, this is what I went through. Oh, that sounds like what I went through. I can help you with that a little bit. Okay?
Yeah, that's what I want to do.
Actually wanting to as well, because it's like anything. If I buy my wife a gift, I find it far more exciting than buying myself a gift. It's just the way we're programming, isn't it? So by giving advice and seeing someone do it and then giving you maybe a thank you back, It's way more exciting, and it just tends to keep you on the straight and narrow more because you go, I do know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
and,
exactly. Yeah, like before I didn't know what I was talking about. I remember watching videos religiously leading up to it and seeing people that were at the stage I'm at now or further and being like, wow, I can't wait. It was like a dream, like, oh, wow, I can't wait for that day. And now I'm here. I want to be that person being like, right, I knew exactly how that felt. I'm here. Come on, like, here you go. We're here. We can do this kind of thing. And yeah, like, I hope even if I had just helped one person, I hope, I'd be happy.
Well, coming on to this, absolutely, because we get people who listen to this who haven't had it done, and thinking about. I get people message me when I call them up on the intro call. And they're like, "Yeah, I know you." I'm like, okay. It's a nice warm intro.
Yeah.
I think what fascinates me, and this shows how far you've come, probably more than anything else, is like I said when I asked you, Lauren, pre-op. You had a very, very, very succinct, in tune answer with yourself. You said about the medical side of it, of course the stroke, which is I can't imagine what that's like. It's a massive, massive factor.
Yeah.
The children, all these sort of things, and I wonder if I asked you that, end of last year, would the answer be different? And I would say the answer probably would have been. You mentioned earlier on maybe feeling a bit more like I don't know why that's the.
Yeah, it would have been. I would have been.
And I think that mindset change is probably the biggest non-sale victory of them all, because that's going to hold you in such good stead now. And it's a hard one to explain to people. Do hard things well, and the best things come along. But life's always been like that. If I gave you a Ferrari, you wouldn't appreciate it. If you saved up for a Ferrari and bought one, you'd really, really, really appreciate it. And it's
exactly.
and it's and I think that's huge. And I think you should be. You mentioned earlier on being proud of yourself. I think I'm just going to just sort of compound that and say you should be tremendously proud of yourself, because there's dynamics there that I couldn't even dream of. Okay, and I'm not just talking about times 5 of what I've got. I'm talking about the stroke and all the sort of bipolar. I mean, before we go, actually, what I'd be keen to talk about actually is bipolar, navigating that post procedure. How was that?
So with my BPD, so I have BPD, which is borderline personality disorder, and I also have bipolar. So they're mood disorders. So post-op, do you know what? It's really, well, see, now people are probably in the BPD community now are going to be like, Lauren, you're talking rubbish. But for the first time in my life, I could breathe because I was so focused on my eating and on stages and stuff like that. For the first time in my life, my mind was quiet, which is hard to say.
Oh, sorry, Lloyd. It cut out a really. Sorry, Lloyd. It cut a really important stage. I didn't catch that. Say again. Sorry. You what? Sorry.
For the first time in my life, because I was so focused on after having it up, because I was so focused on what I could eat and the stages and taking my meds and everything like that. My mind, for the first time in my life, was quiet.
Okay.
And
yes.
That